When most people hear the name Lucifer, they immediately think of Satan, the adversary of God, and the embodiment of darkness. Yet few stop to consider that before he became the symbol of rebellion, Lucifer was once the most magnificent being in all of heaven. His story is not merely about the fall of an angel. It is a profound warning about pride, ambition, and the choices that can alter a destiny forever. Before we begin this journey into one of the most fascinating narratives in biblical tradition, take a moment to subscribe and follow the channel. If you enjoy exploring Bible stories, spiritual history, and timeless lessons that still speak to our lives today, your support helps us continue creating meaningful content for future episodes. Now, let us travel back to a time before humanity existed. Before there were wars, suffering, heartbreak, or death. Before temptation entered creation, there was only harmony. Heaven was filled with light and perfect peace. No shadow of evil existed there. No pain, no betrayal, no conflict. Every being lived in complete unity with the Creator. The heavenly hosts worshipped God continually, and their songs echoed throughout eternity like a magnificent symphony. Every note carried gratitude, joy, and reverence. Everything existed exactly as it was meant to be. Among all the heavenly beings, one stood above the rest. His name was Lucifer. His name meant light bearer or morning star. From the moment he was created, Lucifer possessed a beauty unlike any other creature in heaven. His brilliance seemed to radiate from within. He was not only beautiful but extraordinarily intelligent, gifted, and powerful. If the angels were like stars scattered across the heavens, Lucifer was the brightest among them all. Ancient descriptions portray him as a masterpiece of divine craftsmanship. Every aspect of his being reflected glory. Wherever he appeared, light seemed to follow him. His presence inspired admiration throughout the heavenly realm. No angel could compare to him in splendor. Yet what truly distinguished Lucifer was not his appearance. He had been entrusted with a sacred responsibility. He served near the throne of God and played a central role in heavenly worship. His music filled heaven with beauty and wonder. When Lucifer led the songs of praise, countless angels joined their voices with his. The melodies that flowed from him were not merely sounds. They were expressions of devotion, love, and thanksgiving to the Creator. In many ways, Lucifer enjoyed a relationship with God that few others experienced. He was loved, he was trusted, he was honored with privileges beyond imagination. He lived in the direct presence of divine glory and knew firsthand the majesty of the one who had created him. From a human perspective, Lucifer seemed to possess everything anyone could desire. He had influence, he had respect, he had beauty, he had talent, he had purpose, he had favor. Yet history repeatedly teaches a sobering truth. Destruction often begins not with what we lack, but with what we already possess. At first, Lucifer used every gift he had to glorify God. He understood that his beauty, wisdom, and authority were blessings granted by the Creator. He knew his place within the order of heaven and served faithfully. But over time, something subtle began to change. No trumpet announced it, no alarm sounded, no rebellion erupted overnight. The transformation began quietly, deep within his heart. Lucifer started paying more attention to himself. He noticed his beauty. He recognized his authority. He became increasingly aware of how different he was from the other angels. By themselves, these observations was not sinful, but they created fertile ground for something dangerous to grow. Slowly, Lucifer spent less time looking toward God and more time looking at himself. He saw his exceptional gifts. He saw his unmatched brilliance. He saw the admiration he received from others. And eventually, a question emerged in his mind. Why does all worship belong to God alone? Why does no one honor me? If I possess such light, such beauty, and such power, am I truly so much lower than the one I serve? At first, these thoughts appeared only as fleeting whispers. They passed through his mind like brief shadows, crossing a bright sky. But thoughts that are entertained eventually become beliefs, and beliefs shape destiny. The questions returned, again and again. Each time they grew stronger. What had once been gratitude slowly transformed into self-admiration. What had once been service began to evolve into self-interest. What had once been humility started becoming ambition. Lucifer no longer found satisfaction in reflecting God's glory. Deep within, he began longing for glory of his own. The praise that once inspired him now seems insufficient. The position that once brought joy no longer felt high enough. Without realizing it, He had started measuring himself against the Creator. The more he focused on himself, the more his perspective changed. He became fascinated by his own greatness. He began believing that his extraordinary gifts entitled him to something more, something greater. A seed had been planted. It was invisible to everyone else. The songs of heaven continued. The angels still worshipped. The light still shone throughout the heavenly realm. Yet within Lucifer's heart, another force was taking shape. Pride, and pride is rarely loud at the beginning. It whispers before it shouts. It persuades before it destroys. It convinces a person that admiration is deserved, that authority should increase, that recognition should be greater. Little by little, pride transforms gratitude into entitlement. That transformation was now unfolding within the morning star. The angel who had once reflected God's glory was beginning to desire that glory for himself. The servant was beginning to dream of becoming ruler. The worship leader was beginning to desire worship. The creature was beginning to question the Creator. And although heaven still appeared perfect on the outside, darkness had already taken its first step inward. No one could yet see the coming storm. No one could yet hear the echoes of rebellion that would one day shake the heavenly realm. But the process had begun. The brightest angel in heaven was slowly drifting away from the very source of the light that had made him glorious. And that unseen change would eventually ignite the first rebellion in spiritual history, transforming the morning star into the greatest enemy heaven would ever know. Yet the story was only beginning. The pride growing within Lucifer remained hidden from the eyes of the heavenly hosts, but it could not remain hidden forever. A moment was approaching that would expose what had been developing in his heart. It would become the turning point that transformed private thoughts into open rebellion. One day, throughout heaven, a new declaration was made. The Creator revealed a plan unlike anything the angels had ever heard before. God would create a new race, a new order of beings. They would be called humanity. The announcement spread through the heavenly realm like a wave of wonder. Angels listened as God revealed that these future beings would be created in His image. They would possess free will, the capacity to love, and a unique place within His eternal purpose. Though fragile compared to angels, they would play a central role in a future plan that extended far beyond what anyone could yet understand. Many of the heavenly hosts received the news with awe. They trusted the wisdom of the Creator. Whatever God planned would undoubtedly reveal His glory. But Lucifer's reaction was different. At first, he simply listened. Then he questioned. Then he struggled. Something about this announcement disturbed him in a way he could not ignore. Why create another race? Why introduce beings who would seemingly occupy such an important role? Why grant them such extraordinary significance? The questions multiplied inside him. For ages, Lucifer had stood among the highest beings in heaven. He had enjoyed honor, privilege, and proximity to the throne of God. Yet now, for the first time, he sensed that the spotlight was moving away from him. The thought unsettled him. He watched as discussions about humanity spread through heaven. He heard excitement among angels who anticipated the unfolding of God's plan. But instead of sharing their anticipation, Lucifer felt something darker beginning to take shape: jealousy. It did not arrive all at once. It rarely does. Like pride, jealousy grows quietly. It feeds on comparison. It thrives on perceived injustice. And soon Lucifer found himself comparing his position to that of creatures who did not even exist yet. What made them so special? Why would God invest so much attention in them? Why should humanity receive such favor? The more he reflected on these questions, the more resentment grew within him. Eventually, he reached a conclusion. He believed he deserved more, far more. After all, he was magnificent, he was powerful, he was beautiful, he had served faithfully, he had stood near God's throne while humanity had not even been created. In his mind, the comparison seemed obvious. If anyone deserved special honor, it was him. If anyone deserved greater authority, it was him. If anyone deserved a higher position, it was him. The dangerous thing about pride is that it slowly rewrites reality. Lucifer no longer viewed God's decisions through trust. He evaluated them through self-interest. Instead of asking what glorified God, he began asking what benefited him. And because humanity appeared to threaten his sense of importance, he rejected the plan before it had even begun. The dissatisfaction growing inside him became impossible to contain. He no longer merely questioned, he resisted. At first only in his thoughts, then in his attitudes, then in his desires. The seed of rebellion had taken root, and now it was beginning to bear fruit. As Lucifer wrestled with these emotions, a new ambition emerged within him. He no longer wanted greater recognition alone, he wanted greater authority. The thought came gradually, almost imperceptibly.
If I possess such beauty, if I possess such wisdom,
if I possess such power, why should I remain beneath another forever? That question changed everything. For the first time, Lucifer imagined himself not merely as a servant of God, but as an equal. The idea intoxicated him. What had once seemed impossible now appeared desirable. His imaginations expanded beyond anything he had previously considered. He envisioned a throne, his own throne, a kingdom, his own kingdom. Followers, his own followers. Worship, his own worship. The ambition that had begun as dissatisfaction evolved into something far more dangerous. Lucifer wanted the position of God himself. He wanted authority without limitation, power without accountability, glory without submission. In his mind, he was no longer a created being dependent upon the Creator. He was becoming the center of his own universe. The ancient whispers of pride now transformed into bold declarations. Within his heart, he began making promises to himself. I will ascend higher. I will exalt my throne above the stars. I will become like the Most High. I will establish my own dominion. These were not merely thoughts anymore. They were ambitions, goals, declarations of war against the order of heaven itself. The tragedy was not simply that Lucifer desired greatness. Greatness had already been given to him. The tragedy was that he desired greatness without God. He wanted glory disconnected from its source. He wanted power disconnected from obedience. He wanted the crown without acknowledging the king. And as these ambitions grew stronger, the transformation within him accelerated. The light that had once defined him began to fade, not physically at first, spiritually. The joy that had once filled his service disappeared. The humility that had once guided him vanished. The love he had for God was gradually replaced by self-love. His heart became darker with every passing moment. Where gratitude once lived, entitlement now ruled. Where devotion once flourished, resentment took root. Where worship once flowed freely, ambition took control. The angels around him could sense that something was changing. The brilliance remained, the beauty remained, the authority remained. But something deeper had shifted. The atmosphere surrounding Lucifer was no longer the same. He still spoke of greatness, but increasingly the greatness he spoke of was his own. He still discussed glory, but increasingly the glory he desired belonged to himself. The transformation was becoming impossible to hide. The morning star was slowly losing sight of the one who had made him shine, and as his pride reached new heights, the distance between Lucifer and God continued to grow. Soon, private ambition would become public rebellion. Soon, hidden dissatisfaction would become open defiance. Soon, heaven itself would face a crisis unlike anything it had ever known. The greatest angel ever created was preparing to challenge the authority of the Creator, and the consequences would shake eternity itself. The line had now been crossed. What began as private dissatisfaction had grown into personal ambition. What began as questions had become convictions. And convictions, when fueled by pride, rarely remain hidden for long. Lucifer could no longer keep his vision to himself. The desire for a throne demanded followers. The dream of a kingdom required supporters. And so, for the first time in the history of heaven, the morning star began to spread ideas that had never existed before. Ideas of independence, ideas of self-exaltation, ideas of rebellion. At first, Lucifer was careful. He did not openly declare war against God. Such a move would have been too obvious, too sudden. Instead, he planted seeds of doubt. He spoke quietly with angels who admired him. He asked questions rather than making accusations. He encouraged them to think differently, to question what had always been accepted, to reconsider what they believed about authority. The conversations began subtly. Why must all authority belong to one throne? Why should limitless potential remain forever in service? Why should we never seek something greater? For many angels, these questions felt strange and uncomfortable. Heaven had always operated according to God's perfect order. There had never been a reason to challenge it. Yet Lucifer possessed extraordinary influence. His intelligence was unmatched. His charisma was powerful. His reputation carried enormous weight. Many angels respected him deeply, and because they respected him, they listened. Gradually, Lucifer began presenting a new vision. He spoke of freedom. He spoke of self-determination. He spoke of a future in which angels would no longer exist beneath absolute authority. His words sounded appealing. He never described his movement as rebellion. He described it as liberation. He never framed himself as a rival to God. He portrayed himself as a visionary, a leader, a reformer. Someone brave enough to challenge an outdated system. The irony was profound. The angels already lived in perfect freedom under a loving creator. Yet Lucifer convinced some of them that they were somehow restricted. That is often how deception works. It persuades people to reject what they already possess in pursuit of something they never needed. As Lucifer continued speaking, more angels gathered around him. Some were curious, some were uncertain, others became fascinated. He promised a new order, a new future, a new kingdom where power would be shared differently. A place where greatness would not be confined beneath a single throne. To those who listened, the vision sounded exciting, revolutionary, even noble, and slowly, one by one, some angels began to believe him. The movement grew. What had once been isolated conversations became organized allegiance. Followers emerged. Supporters pledged loyalty. The rebellion was no longer confined to Lucifer's heart. It was spreading throughout heaven itself. Many who joined him were attracted by the same temptation that had consumed him. Power, recognition, status. The promise of becoming something greater than they already were. The tragedy was that none of them realized they were following a path that led only to destruction. Meanwhile, not every angel was persuaded. Many immediately recognized the danger. They understood that Lucifer's vision was built upon pride rather than truth. Among those who saw clearly was Michael. Michael was respected throughout heaven, not because of unmatched beauty or extraordinary charisma, but because of unwavering loyalty to God. He understood something Lucifer had forgotten. True greatness comes from serving the Creator, not replacing him. As reports of Lucifer's growing influence spread across heaven, Michael watched with increasing concern. He could see the division forming. He could hear the subtle changes in conversation. He could feel the tension growing throughout the heavenly realm. For the first time, heaven was no longer completely united. Two sides were emerging. One remained faithful to God. The other followed Lucifer. The division was painful. Many of these angels had worshipped together for ages. They had served side by side. They had shared the joy of God's presence. Now they stood on opposite sides of a widening gulf. Michael understood where this road would lead. He knew rebellion could not coexist with divine authority forever. A confrontation was inevitable, but before that final confrontation arrived, he decided to make one last attempt. One final appeal. One final conversation. Perhaps Lucifer could still be reached. Perhaps the morning star could still remember who he once was. Perhaps pride had not yet completely consumed him. Michael sought him out. When they finally stood face to face, the contrast between them was striking. Lucifer radiated confidence, Michael carried sorrow. Lucifer saw opportunity, Michael saw catastrophe. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Michael broke the silence. "Brother," he said, "this path leads only to ruin." The words hung heavily in the air. Lucifer's expression remained unchanged. Michael continued, "You were honored above many. You were trusted. You were loved. Everything you possess was given by the one who created you." Still, Lucifer said nothing. "The Father has never withheld good from you," Michael continued. "Why throw away everything for a throne that was never yours to claim?" For a brief moment, memories seemed to flicker behind Lucifer's eyes. Memories of worship, memories of joy, memories of standing in God's presence before pride entered his heart. But the moment passed quickly. The ambition that had been growing inside him for so long was now too deeply rooted. Michael took one final step forward. "Turn back," he pleaded. "There is still time. Do not let pride destroy what God created. Do not exchange truth for ambition. Do not mistake his patience for weakness." The warning was sincere. The invitation was genuine. Had Lucifer chosen differently at that moment, history itself might have changed. But pride rarely retreats voluntarily. Once it convinces someone they deserve more, humility begins to feel like defeat. Lucifer's eyes hardened. His answer came without hesitation. "No." The single word echoed through the silence. "I will not bow. I will not remain beneath another forever. I will not surrender what I am becoming." Michael's heart sank. The choice had been made. Lucifer no longer questioned God's authority. He rejected it. He no longer desired reconciliation. He desired power. He no longer sought understanding. he sought supremacy. The final bridge between heaven's most glorious angel and his creator had now been burned. There would be no turning back, no compromise, no peaceful resolution. The rebellion had become irreversible. And as the two mighty angels stood facing one another, both understood the same terrifying truth. The next chapter would not be fought with words, it would be fought with war. And the greatest conflict heaven had ever known was about to begin. The final words had been spoken. Michael's plea had been rejected. Lucifer's choice was made. What had begun as a hidden thought had become a movement. What had become a movement had grown into open defiance. And now, for the first time in the history of heaven, conflict could no longer be avoided. A strange tension settled across the heavenly realm. The peace that had defined eternity seemed to tremble beneath the weight of what was coming. Angels who had once worshipped side by side now stood, separated by conviction. The divide was no longer philosophical, it was no longer emotional, it had become absolute. Every being in heaven understood that a decisive moment had arrived. There would be no negotiations, no compromise, no middle ground. Only two choices remained: loyalty or rebellion, submission or self-exaltation, truth or deception. Across the vast expanse of heaven, the faithful angels gathered under Michael's leadership. They did not prepare for battle out of hatred. They prepared out of devotion. Their loyalty belonged to the Creator who had given them life, purpose, and identity. Michael stood among them, not as a conqueror seeking power, but as a servant defending what was holy. On the opposite side stood Lucifer. Gone was the humble worship leader who once filled heaven with songs of praise. In his place stood a revolutionary consumed by ambition. The brilliance remained, the beauty remained, the power remained, but the heart had changed. Where love had once lived, pride now ruled. Where worship had once flourished, rebellion now burned. Around him gathered those who had accepted his vision. They believed a new order was possible. They believed Lucifer's promises. They believed they were fighting for freedom. But in reality, they were fighting against the very source of their existence. Then the moment arrived. The first conflict in heaven began. No human language can fully describe what happened next. This was not merely a clash of strength. It was a collision of principles. A battle between opposing visions of reality itself. The armies advanced. Michael led the hosts loyal to God. Lucifer commanded the forces of rebellion. The impact of their confrontation shook the heavenly realm. Power met power, will met will. Authority confronted defiance. The conflict spread like a storm across the celestial domains. Angels who had stood together for ages now faced one another across the battlefield. Some fought with sorrow, others fought with conviction, but all understood that the outcome would determine the future of heaven itself. At the center of the conflict stood Michael and Lucifer, once brothers in service, now enemies divided by choice. Lucifer fought with relentless determination. Every moment of pride, every ambition, every resentment he had nurtured fueled his resolve. He believed he deserved victory. He believed he deserved the throne. He believed the future belonged to him. But beneath that confidence lay a deeper reality. He was fighting against the very order upon which all creation depended, and no created being, regardless of beauty or power, could ultimately overthrow the Creator. As the conflict intensified, its true nature became increasingly clear. This was never merely a struggle between angels. It was a battle between light and darkness. Light represented truth, humility, and dependence upon God. Darkness represented deception, pride, and self-glorification. It was a battle between humility and arrogance. Michael fought because he recognized God's authority. Lucifer fought because he rejected it. It was a battle between obedience and rebellion. One side trusted the wisdom of the Creator, the other trusted its own desires. The deeper the conflict progressed, the more obvious the difference became. The loyal angels fought with purpose. The rebels fought with ambition. The loyal fought for truth. The rebels fought for self. And ultimately, self can never sustain what truth has established. The rebellion that had appeared powerful began to reveal its weakness. For all his brilliance, Lucifer had built his cause upon a foundation that could not endure. Pride always appears strong in the beginning, but it eventually collapses under its own weight. Then, at the height of the conflict, everything changed. A silence spread across heaven. The battle paused, the movement of armies ceased. The clash of wills came to an end. Something greater had entered the moment, the presence of God. The Creator who had allowed choice now stepped forward as judge. No army could challenge his authority. No rebellion could overpower his will. No created being could stand as his equal. Throughout heaven, every voice fell silent. Every eye turned toward the throne. The rebellion that had shaken eternity was about to face divine judgment. Then God spoke. His voice carried neither uncertainty nor hesitation. It carried truth. Absolute, final, unchanging. The rebellion was over. The verdict had been rendered. Lucifer, once the morning star, had chosen pride over obedience. He had chosen ambition over worship. He had chosen himself over the one who created him. And now he would bear the consequences of that choice. The sentence was irreversible. Lucifer would no longer hold his position. He would no longer stand among the faithful. He would no longer dwell within the glory of heaven. The honor he once carried would be stripped away. The authority he once enjoyed would be removed. The place he once occupied near the throne would belong to him no longer. For the first time, Lucifer faced a reality he had never imagined. Defeat, not because he lacked power, not because he lacked intelligence, but because pride had blinded him to the limits of a created being. Then came the moment that would echo throughout eternity. Lucifer and those who followed him were cast out. The kingdom they sought to seize rejected them. The heaven they attempted to overthrow expelled them. The glory they once possessed vanished before their eyes. What had been honor became disgrace. What had been beauty became corruption. What had been light became darkness. The fall was complete. The morning star who once reflected the brilliance of God descended into ruin. The worship leader became the rebel. The favored servant became the adversary. The bearer of light became the prince of darkness. And as Lucifer disappeared from heaven, a profound lesson was written into the fabric of creation itself. No height is so great that pride cannot destroy it. No gift is so extraordinary that it cannot be corrupted. No position is so exalted that it places a created being above the authority of God. The rebellion was over. The judgment was final. But the story of Lucifer was far from finished. For although he had lost heaven, he had not abandoned his hatred. And beyond the gates of paradise, a new chapter of darkness was about to begin. Beyond the gates of heaven, silence followed the fall. The rebellion had ended, but its consequences had only begun. For Lucifer, the greatest loss was not the throne he never possessed. It was the identity he had thrown away. For ages, he had been known as the morning star, the bearer of light, the most honored among the heavenly hosts. His name had once been associated with beauty, wisdom, and worship. Wherever he went, he reflected the glory of the Creator. He had lived in the presence of God, surrounded by purpose and meaning. Now all of that was gone. The title that once inspired admiration became a distant memory. The privileges he once enjoyed vanished. The honor he once carried was stripped away. The angel, who had desired to rise higher than all others, found himself lower than he had ever imagined. Yet the tragedy ran deeper than the loss of position. Lucifer had lost the very thing that gave meaning to his existence. He had lost fellowship with God. Every gift he once possessed had flowed from the Creator. Every moment of joy had been rooted in God's presence. Every purpose had been connected to God's will. Now he stood separated from the source of all those things. The emptiness that followed could not be filled by power, ambition, or rebellion. And in that darkness, something new emerged. Lucifer was no longer simply a fallen angel. He became Satan, the adversary, the accuser, the enemy. His transformation was not merely a change of title, it was a change of nature. The humility that once defined him had disappeared. Love had been replaced by hatred. Devotion had been replaced by defiance. Worship had been replaced by self-exaltation. Everything he once represented had been inverted. The brightest servant in heaven became the greatest opponent of God's purposes. Yet, even after his defeat, Satan refused to repent. Defeat did not produce humility. It produced bitterness. The rebellion had failed, but the desire to oppose God remained alive within him. If he could not overthrow the Creator, he would seek to corrupt what the Creator loved. If he could not seize heaven, he would attack God's creation. If he could not destroy God, he would seek to wound the hearts of those made in God's image. And so Satan waited. He watched. He planned. Somewhere beyond the boundaries of heaven, a new world was being prepared, a world called Earth, a world that would soon become the stage for the next chapter in the great conflict. Humanity had not yet entered the story, but Satan already viewed them as targets. The same jealousy that had fueled his rebellion now turned toward God's future creation. The war he had started in heaven would eventually reach the world of men. The consequences of Lucifer's fall extended far beyond himself. His rebellion affected every angel who chose to follow him. Those who had trusted his promises shared his fate. They too were removed from heaven. They too lost the glory they once possessed. They too became separated from the presence of God. What they had expected to be a revolution of freedom became a kingdom of exile. What they believed would bring power brought only ruin. Their loyalty to Lucifer transformed them into participants in darkness. Together, they became a force opposed to God's purposes. A kingdom built not upon truth, but upon deception. Not upon love, but upon pride. Not upon life, but upon rebellion. Yet the effects of the fall reached even further. For the first time in creation, spiritual warfare existed. Before Lucifer's rebellion, there had been only harmony. Now there was conflict. Before his fall, there had been only trust. Now there was deception. Before his rebellion, there had been only obedience. Now there was resistance. The consequences would eventually touch humanity. Future generations would face temptation, suffering, and spiritual struggles that trace their origins back to this ancient rebellion. The battle that began in heaven would continue throughout human history. Kingdoms would rise and fall. Empires would come and go. Generations would pass away. Yet the conflict between truth and deception would remain. And that is why the story of Lucifer is more than a story about an angel. It is a story about a principle that continues to affect every human heart: pride. The same force that destroyed Lucifer still destroys lives today. Lucifer did not fail because he lacked intelligence. He did not fail because he lacked beauty. He did not fail because he lacked power. In fact, he possessed more of those things than almost any created being. He fell because he placed himself above God. His downfall began the moment he believed his gifts made him greater than the one who gave them. That lesson remains as relevant now as it was in eternity past. Position does not guarantee faithfulness. Talent does not guarantee wisdom. Success does not guarantee character. The most gifted creature in heaven still fell when pride took root in his heart. Human history repeatedly confirms the same truth. Many people are destroyed, not by weakness, but by arrogance. Not by failure, but by self-exaltation. The story of Lucifer reminds us that greatness without humility eventually collapses. It also reminds us of something even greater. No one can replace the Creator. Lucifer tried. He failed. Others throughout history have attempted to place themselves above God. They too have failed. Power rises and falls. Kingdoms appear and disappear. Fame fades. Wealth vanishes. But God's authority remains unchanged. His throne remains secure. His purposes continue. His glory belongs to him alone. And perhaps the most important lesson of all is this: darkness may rise, rebellion may spread, evil may appear powerful for a season. There are moments in history when darkness seems to be winning, moments when truth appears weak, moments when hope feels distant. But the story of Lucifer reveals the final outcome before the struggle even begins. Darkness cannot overcome eternal light. Rebellion cannot overthrow eternal truth. Creation cannot defeat its creator. The rebellion in heaven ended in defeat because pride can never triumph over God. And one day, every remaining shadow will disappear before his presence. That is how the story ends. The morning star became Satan. The favored servant became the adversary. The brightest angel fell into darkness. Yet above every rebellion, beyond every conflict, and throughout every generation, one truth remains unchanged. The light of God still shines. And in the end, that light will prevail forever.